Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, Chapter 4, The Keeper of Keys. Boom! They knocked again. Dudley jerked away. "Where's the cannon?" he said stupidly. There was a crash behind them, and Uncle Vernon came sliding into the room. He was holding a rifle in his hands. Now they knew what had been in the long, thin package he had brought with them. "Who's there?" he shouted. "I warn you, I'm armed." There was a pause. Then, smash! The door was hit with such force that it swung clean off its hinges, and with a deafening crash landed flat on the floor. A giant of a man was standing in the doorway. His face was almost completely hidden by a long, shaggy mane of hair and a wild, tangled beard. But you could make out of his eyes, glinting like black beetles under all the hair. The giant squeezed his way into the hut, stooping so that his head just brushed the ceiling. He bent down, picked up the door, and fitted it easily back into its frame. The noise of the storm outside dropped a little. He turned to look at them all. "Couldn't make us a cup of tea, could you? It's not been an easy journey." He strode over to the sofa where Dudley sat frozen with fear. "Budge up, you're a great lump," said the stranger. Dudley squeaked and ran to hide behind his mother, who was crouching terrified behind Uncle Vernon. "And here is Harry," said the giant. Harry looked up into Fion's wild, shadowy face and saw that the beetle eyes were wrinkled in a smile. "Last time I saw you, you was only a baby," said the giant. "You look a lot like your dad, but you've got your mum's eyes." Uncle Vernon made a funny rasping noise. "I demand you at once, sir," he said. "You're breaking and entering." "Ah, shut up, Dudley, you great prune," said the giant. He reached over the back of the sofa, jerked the gun out of the Uncle Vernon's hand, bent it into a knot as easily as if it had been made of rubber, and threw it into a corner of the room. Uncle Vernon made an unfunny noise like a mouse being trodden on. "Anyway, Harry," said the giant, turning his back on the Dursleys, "a very happy birthday to you. Got something for you here. I might have sat on it at a point, but it would taste all right." From an inside pocket of his back overcoat, he pulled a slightly squashed box. Harry opened it with his trembling fingers. Inside was a large sticky chocolate cake with "Happy Birthday, Harry" written on it in green icing. Harry looked up at the giant. He meant to say thank you, but the words got lost on the way to his mouth. And what he said instead was, "Who are you?" The great giant blushed. "True, I haven't introduced myself. Rubeus Hagrid, keeper of keys and grounds at Hogwarts." He held out an enormous hand and shook Harry's whole arm. "What about the tea then, he said, rubbing his hands together. "I had not say no to someone stronger if you had got it, mind." His eyes fell on the empty crate with a shriveled crisp packages in it, and he snorted. He bent down over the fireplace. They couldn't see what he was doing, but when he drew back a second later, there was a roaring fire there. It filled the whole damp hut with flickering light, and Harry felt the warmth wash over him as though he had sunk into a hot bath. The giant sat back down on the sofa, which sagged under his weight, and began taking all sorts of things out of the pockets of his coat. A copper kettle, a squashy package of sausages, a poker, a teapot, several chipped mugs, and a bottle of some amber liquid which he took a swig from before starting to make tea. Soon the hut was full of the sound and smell of sizzling sausages. Nobody said a thing while the giant was working, but as he sliced the first 6 fat, juicy, slightly burnt sausages from the poker, Dudley fidgeted a little. Uncle Vernon said sharply, "Don't touch anything he gives you, Dudley." The giant blushed darkly. "The great pudding of sun don't need fattening any more, Dudley. Don't worry." He passed the sausages to Harry, who was hungry. He had never tasted anything so wonderful, but he still couldn't take his eyes off the giant. Finally, as nobody seemed about to explain anything, he said, "I'm sorry, but I still don't really know. Who are you?" The giant took a gulp of tea and wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. "Call me Hagrid," he said. "Everyone does. And like I told you, I'm keeper of keys at Hogwarts. You'll know all about it. Hogwarts, of course." No," said Harry. Hagrid looked shocked. "Sorry," Harry said quickly. "Sorry?" barked Hagrid, turning to stare at the Dursleys, who shrank back into the shadows. "It's them I should be sorry. I knew you weren't getting your letters, but I never thought you wouldn't know even about Hogwarts. For crying out loud, did you never wonder where your parents learned it all?" "All what?" asked Harry. "All what?" Hagrid thundered. "Now wait just 1 second." He had leapt to his feet in his anger. He seemed to fill the whole hut. The Dursleys were cowering against the wall. "Do you mean you tell me," he growled at the Dursleys, "that this boy knows nothing about anything?" Harry thought this was going a bit far. He had been to school after all, and his marks weren't bad. "I know some things," he said. "I can, do maths and stuff." But Hagrid simply waved his hand and said, "About our world. I mean, your world, my world, your parents' world." "What world?" Hagrid looked as if he was going to explode. "Dursley!" he boomed. Uncle Vernon, who had gone very pale, whispered something that sounded like "Mibble Wibble." Hagrid stared wildly at Harry. "But you must know about your mom and dad," he said. "I mean, they were famous. You are famous." "What? My mom? My mom and dad weren't famous, were they?" You don't know? You don't know?" Hagrid ran his fingers through his hair, fixing Harry with a bewildered stare. "You don't know what you are?" he said finally. Uncle Vernon suddenly found his voice. "Stop!" he demanded. "Stop right there, sir. I forbid you to tell the boy anything." A braver man than Vernon Dursley would have coiled under the furious look Hagrid now gave him. When Hagrid spoke, his very syllable trembled with rage. "You never told him what was in the letter Dumbledore left for him." "I was there. I was Dumbledore. I saw Dumbledore leave it, Dursley. And you have kept it from him all these years?" "Kept what from me?" said Harry eagerly. "Stop! I forbid you!" yelled Uncle Vernon in panic. Aunt Petunia gave a gasp of horror. "Ah, go boil your hands, both of you," said Hagrid. "Harry, you're a wizard." There was a silence inside the hut. Only the sea and the rustling wind could be heard. "I am a what?" gasped Harry. "A wizard, of course," said Hagrid, sitting back down on the sofa with groaned and sank even lower, and a tramping Gondon. "I'd say, once you have been trained up a bit, with a mom and dad like yours, what else would you be? And I reckon it's about time you read your letter." Harry stretched out his hand at last to take the yellowish envelope addressed in emerald to Mr. H. Potter, the floor, hut on the rock, the sea, he pulled out the letter and read, Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, Headmaster Albus Dumbledore, Order of Merlin, First Class, Grand Soror, Chief Wall Clerk, Supreme Mugwump, International Convent of Wizards. Dear Mr. Potter, we are pleased to inform you that you have a place at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Please find enclosed a list of all necessary books and equipment. Term begins on 1st September. We await your owl by no later than 31st July. Yours sincerely, Minerva McGonagall, Deputy Headmistress. Questions exploded inside Harry's head like fireworks, and he couldn't decide which to ask first. After a few minutes, he stammered, What does it mean? They await my owl? Galloping gorgons. That reminds me, said Hagrid, clapping a hand to his forehead with enough force to knock over a cart horse, and from yet another pocket inside his overcoat he pulled an owl. A real, live, rather ruffled-looking owl. A long quill and an owl and a roll of parchment. With this tongue between his teeth, he scribbled a note which Harry could read upside down. Dear Mr. Dumbledore, given Harry his letter, taking him to buy his things tomorrow. Weather's horrible. Hope you are well. Hagrid. Hagrid rolled up the note, gave it to the owl, which clammed in its beak, went to the door and threw the owl out into the storm. Then he came back and sat down as though this was as normal as talking on the telephone. Harry realized his mouth was open and closed it quickly. Where I was, said Hagrid. But at that moment Uncle Vernon, still a stern-faced but looking very angry, moved into the firelight. He's not going, he said. Hagrid grunted. I'd say to see a great muggle like you stop him, he said. A what? Said Hagrid, interested. A muggle, said Hagrid. It's what we call non-magic folk like him, and it's your bad luck you grew up in a family of the biggest muggles I ever laid eyes on. We swore when we took him we had put a stop to all that rubbish, said Uncle Vernon. Swore we had stamped it out of him. Wizards, indeed. You knew, said Harry. You knew I'm a wizard. Knew? Shrieked Aunt Petunia suddenly. Knew? Of course we knew. How could you not be, my traitor sister, being what she was? Oh, she got a letter just like that and disappeared off to that school and came home every holiday with that pockets full of frog swamp, turning teacups into rats. I was the only one who saw her for what she was, a freak. But for my mother and father, oh no, it was Lily this and Lily that. They were proud of having a witch in the family. She stopped to draw a deep breath and then went ranting on. It seemed she had been wanting to say all this for years. Then she meets that Potter at school, and they left and got married and had you. And of course I knew you had been just the same, just as strange, just as abnormal. And then, if you please, she went and got herself blown up. And we got landed with you. Harry had gone very white. As soon as he found his voice, he said, Blown up? You told me they died in a car crash. Car crash? roared Hagrid, jumping up so eagerly that the Dursleys skunted back to their corner. "How could a car crash kill Lily and James Potter? It's an outrage, a scandal. Harry Potter not knowing his own story when every kid in our world knows his name." But why? What happened?" Harry asked urgently. The anger faded from Hagrid's face. He looked suddenly anxious. "I never expected this," he said in a low voice, worried voice. "I had no idea when Dumbledore told me there might be trouble getting hold of you. How much you didn't know. Harry, I don't know if I'm the right person to tell you, but someone got to tell you can't go off to Hogwarts not knowing." He threw a dirty look at Dursley's. "Well, it's best time you know as much as I can tell you. Mind, I can't tell you everything. It's a great mystery, part of it." He sat down, stared into the fire for a few seconds, and then said, "It begins, I suppose, with a person called, but it's incredible. You don't know his name. Everyone in our world knows." "Who?" "Well, I don't like saying the name. If I can help it, no one does." "Why not?" "Gulping gargoyles, Harry. People are still scared. Believe me, this is difficult. See, there was this wizard who went bad as you could go. Worse and worse. His name was—" Hagrid gulped, but no words came out. "Could you write it down?" Harry suggested. "Nah, can't spell it." "All right. Voldemort." Hagrid stunted. "Don't make me say it again. Anyway, this wizard about 20 years ago started looking for followers. Got them too. Some were afraid, some just wanted a bit of his power, 'cause he was getting himself powerful, all right. Dark days, Harry. Didn't know who to trust, didn't dare get friendly with strange wizards and witches. Terrible things happened. He was talking over. Course, some stood up to him, and he killed them horribly. One of the only safe place left was Hogwarts. Reckon Dumbledore's the only one you know who was afraid of. Didn't dare try getting the school, not just then anyway. Now, your mum and dad were as good a witch and wizard as I ever knew. Head boy and head girl at Hogwarts in that day. Suppose the mystery is why you know who never tried to kill them on his side before, probably knew they were too close to Dumbledore to want anything to do with the dark side. Maybe he thought he could persuade them. Maybe he just wanted them out the way. All anyone knows is he turned up in the village where you was all living on Halloween 10 years ago. You was just a year old. He came to your house and Hagrid suddenly pulled out a very dirty spotted handkerchief and blew his nose with a sound like a foghorn. "Sorry," he said, "but it's that sad. Knew your mom and dad and nicer people you couldn't find anyway. You know who killed them. And this is the real mystery of the thing. He tried to kill you too. Wanted to make a clean job of it, I suppose. Or maybe he just liked killing by then. But he couldn't do it. Never wondered how you got that mark on your forehead? That was no ordinary cut. That's what we get when a powerful evil curse touches you. could could took care of your mom and dad and your house even, but it didn't work on you, and that's why you're famous, Harry. No one ever lived after he decided to kill them. No one except you. And he killed some of the best witches and wizards of the age. The Mackinnons, the Bones, the Prowards, and you was only a baby and you lived. Something very painful was going on in Harry's mind as Hagrid's story came to a close. He saw again the blinding flash of green light more clearly than he had ever remembered it before, and he remembered something else. For the first time in his life, a high, cold, cruel laugh. Hagrid was watching him sadly. Took here from the renewed house myself, on Dumbledore orders, but here to this lot of old tosh, said Uncle Vernon. Harry jumped. He had almost forgotten that the Dursleys were there. Uncle Vernon certainly seemed to have got back his courage. He was glaring at Hagrid, and his fists were clenched. "Now you listen here, boy," he strangled. "I accept there's something strange about you. Probably not a good beating wouldn't have cured. And as for all these about your parents, well, they were weirdos, not denying it. And the world's better off without them, in my opinion. Asked for all they had got, getting mixed up with these wizarding types. Just what I expected. Always. They knew they had come to a sticky end." But at that moment Hagrid leapt from the sofa and drew a poet's pink umbrella from inside his coat, pointing this at Uncle Vernon with a sword, like a sword. He said, "I'm warning you, Dursley. I'm warning you. One more word." In danger of being speared on the end of the umbrella by a bearded giant, Uncle Vernon courage failed again. He flattened himself against the wall and fell silent. "That's better," said Hagrid, breathing heavily and sitting back down on the sofa, which this time sagged right down to the floor. Harry, meanwhile, still had questions to ask, 100 of them. "But what happened to you know who?" "Good question, Harry. Disappeared. Vanished. Same night he tried to kill you. Makes you even more famous. That's the biggest mystery, see? He was getting more and more powerful. Why he go? Some say he died. Codswap, in my opinion, don't know if he had even human left in him to die. Some say he's still out there, biding his time, but I don't believe it. People who was on his side came back to ours. Some of them came out of kinder trenches. Don't reckon they could have done if he was coming back. Most of us reckon he's still out there somewhere but lost his powers, too weak to carry on. 'Cause something about you finished him, Harry. There was something going on that night he hadn't counted on. I don't know what it was, no one does, but something about you stopped him. All right?" Hagrid looked at Harry with warmth and respect of pleasing in his eyes, but Harry, instead of feeling pleased and proud, felt quite sure had been a horrible mistake. A wizard? Him? How could he possibly be? He had spent his life being courted by Dudley and bullied by Aunt Petunia and Uncle Vernon. If he was a really wizard, why hadn't they been turned into whitey thorns every time they had tried to lock him in his cupboard? If he had once defeated the greatest sorcerer in the world, how come Dudley had always been able to kick him around like a football? "Hagrid," he said quietly, "I think you must have made a mistake. I don't think I can be a wizard. To his surprise, Hagrid clutched. Not a wizard, huh? Never made things happen when you were scared or angry? Harry looked into the fire. Now he came to think about it. Every odd thing that had ever made his aunt and uncle furious with him had happened when Harry, had been upset or angry. Chased by Dudley's gang, he had somehow found himself out of their reach. During going to school with that ridiculous haircut, he had managed to make it grow back, and the very last time Dudley had hit him, hadn't he got his revenge? Without even realizing he was doing it, hadn't he set a boa constrictor on him? Harry looked back at Hagrid, smiling, and saw that Hagrid was positively beaming at him. "See," said Hagrid, "Harry Potter, not a wizard. You wait. You will be right famous at Hogwarts." But Uncle Vernon wasn't going to give in without a fight. "Haven't I told you? He's not going," he hissed. "He's going to Stonewall High, and he will be grateful for it. I have read those letters, and he needs all sorts of rubbish, spell books and vans, and if he wants to go, a great muggle like you won't stop him," growled Hagrid. "Stop Lily and James' son going to Hogwarts? You mad? His name's been down ever since he was born. He's off to the finest school of the witchcraft and wizardry in the world. 7 years there, and he won't know himself. He will be with youngsters of his own sort for a change, and he will be under the greatest headmaster Hogwarts ever had, Albus Dumbledore. I am not paying for some crackpot old fool to teach him magic tricks," yelled Uncle Vernon. But he had finally gone too far. Hagrid seized his umbrella and whirled it over his head. "Never," he thundered. "Insult Albus Dumbledore in front of me." He brought the umbrella swishing down through the air to the point at Dudley. There was a flash of violet light, a sound like a firecracker, a sharp squeal, and next second Dudley was dancing on the spot with his hands clasped over his fat bottom, howling in pain. When he turned his back on them, Harry saw a curly pig's tail poking through a hole in his trousers. Uncle Vernon rode, pulling Aunt Petunia and Dudley into the other room. He cast one last terrified look at Hagrid and slammed the door behind him. Hagrid looked down at his umbrella and squirted his beard. "Shouldn't have lost my temper," he said ruefully. "But it didn't work anyway. Meant to turn him into a pig, but I suppose he was much like a pig anyway. There wasn't much left to do." He cast a sideways look at Harry under his bushy eyebrows. "Be grateful if you didn't mention that to anyone at Hogwarts," he said. "I am not supposed to do magic. Strictly speaking, I was allowed to do a bit follow you and get your letters to you and stuff. One of the reasons I was so keen to take on the job." "Why aren't you supposed to do magic?" asked Harry. "Oh, well, I was at Hogwarts myself, but I had got expelled. To tell you the truth, I am in my 3rd year. They snapped my wand in half and everything. But Dumbledore let me stay and was the gamekeeper. Great man, Dumbledore." "Why were you expelled?" "It's getting late. And we have got lots to do tomorrow," said Hagrid loudly. "Got to get up, get to town, get all your books and that." He took off his thick black coat and drew it to Harry. "You can keep under that," he said. "Don't mind if it wrinkles a bit. I think I still got a couple of dormice in one of the pockets."